What's the most satisfying karma you've seen hit a partner who lied for years? Story 1. I married Daniel because he had spreadsheets for everything. Meal plans, budgets, even vacations. Order felt safe. He told me for years our money was optimized, and every time I asked about a joint login, he'd kiss my forehead and recite some jargon about consolidated portals and two-factor headaches. I believed him because the mortgage got paid, my car had gas, and the man could quote APRs like poetry. Then, my company hired a new CFO, Mara, my college roommate, the kind of person who can smell cooked numbers through a PDF. At a happy hour, she jokes, "Your last name is Ramos, right? Wild. I keep seeing a Ramos reimbursing the same vendor we flagged as a shell." I laughed it off, until she slid her phone over. There, in tiny type, was my email as CC. Apparently, I approved $6,400 in bogus consulting every month. My stomach dropped. I went home early, opened Daniel's laptop, sticky note with the password, bless his hubris, and found the shell company's bank account. The transfer history read like a diary of our marriage. Honeymoon month, marketing services, $8,000. Miscarriage month, strategy retainer, $5,200. My birthday, Q3 analysis, $6,400. He'd siphoned our savings to float his crypto hedge fund, which was basically him making panic trades in his bathrobe. I forwarded everything to Mara, to our bank, and to myself. The next morning, I confronted him. He spun, of course. Temporary holes, soon-to-be gains. You just don't understand. That night, my phone buzzed. Mara again. Town hall tomorrow. Might want to attend. The CEO stood in front of 900 employees and announced a fraud investigation that crossed departmental lines. Security escorted Daniel out mid-sentence as he tried to whisper, "Baby, they can't do this." The entire floor watched him lose the job he bragged about for half a decade. 2 weeks later, the IRS letter arrived. 4 thick envelopes. He begged me to keep the house for appearances. I told him he could keep the spreadsheets. The twist? While closing accounts, the banker asked if I wanted to recover notifications for the shell company. I said, yes. The inbox filled with, "Welcome, Miss Ramos." He'd registered the fraud under my maiden name to dodge detection, which meant every dime he stole was in my legal entity. My lawyer smiled so wide I thought his face would crack. He said, "Congratulations," sliding papers across the table. "By proving he used your identity without consent, we get the debts off you and attach them to him personally." Daniel texted me that night. "Can we talk?" I replied with a screenshot of the court order and a single line. "Your optimization is finally consolidated." Story 2. I was 14 when I learned adults can lie in perfect cursive. Dad always said Mom left, ran off when you were 5. He played both roles with theatrical size. Every forgotten lunch, a story about her selfishness. Every award, a monologue about how he saved me. Photographs of her were misplaced. Birthdays were just us two, kiddo. I grew up thinking love was what's left after a storm. Then Nana died, and we spent a Saturday cleaning the attic. I found a shoebox labeled "Winter Scarves," stuffed with letters. The return address was the same on all of them. My mother's. Dozens. Postmarked every month for 8 years. "I'll be at the library Saturday at 2. I sent the court papers. Please call me. Happy birthday, baby. I love you to the moon." Every envelope was slid open and resealed with tape. The custody hearing came a month later. Dad pushing for increased support now that I'd chosen stability. He wore his best cologne and practiced her abandonment in front of the mirror. I brought the shoebox to court. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I set the box down and read. The courtroom went silent. Dad blanched. His lawyer stared at the table. My mother, small, tired, sat 2 rows back, hands shaking. I stood at that library for 2 hours every Saturday, she said quietly when the judge let her speak. Your father texted me that you changed your mind. She held up her phone. Years of messages, all one-sided. Judge Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Dalton, did you intercept these letters? Dad tried the familiar shrug, mix of misunderstanding and martyrdom. The judge's voice went cold. You weaponized a child's trust. He lost custody that day, and the judge ordered reunification counseling with my mother. That was justice enough, but karma kept walking. On graduation night, the principal read the names. When he got to mine, he stumbled. I'd filed the paperwork that morning. Valedictorian Riley Vega. My mother stood, covering her mouth. Dad turned to me in horror. All those years he made me practice his signature for school forms, I used the muscle memory to sign the petition to restore Mom's last name. After the ceremony, Mom handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace with a tiny moon. Third Saturday, she said, laughing through tears, 2 p.m. at the library. I smiled and squeezed her hand. Across the field, Dad's new wife stormed off shouting about his other lies. The shoebox under my arm felt lighter.
Story 3. I was the other woman, and I hate that phrase because it makes me sound like a storm he tripped into. In reality, Lucas courted me with surgical precision. Divorce papers, in process, separate apartment. We're just roommates who co-parent. The whole script delivered with soulful eye contact and weekends that somehow never included Sundays. 3 years. I met his roommate, a formidable woman named Priya. She shook my hand like someone cataloging fingerprints. I should have known her kitchen had no traces of him because he wasn't allowed to cook, not because he'd moved out. The invitation to his company's charity gala arrived with a handwritten note, "Wear red." I did, and so did Priya. She stood beside me at the bar with that same assessing look. "You're the one," she said, not unkindly. "You too," and we both laughed, sharp and brittle. On stage, Lucas launched into his speech about integrity and community. The screens behind him cycled through graphics, sponsors, smiling kids, until they didn't. A slideshow began. Selfies from both of our apartments, 2 sets of holidays, 2 birthday cakes, the same watch in every photo. The room murmured. Beside me, Priya lifted her champagne. "To the IT department," she said. "They fixed the glitch I asked about." Turns out Priya wasn't just a roommate. She was his wife, and also general counsel. She had synced the family iCloud to the Gala AV to test wireless. While he sputtered, she tapped the mic and explained their prenup. Adultery voided his claim on her stock options if proven publicly. "Do you agree this is you, Lucas?" she asked, pointing to the evidence wearing his face. He croaked, "Yes." I stepped up then, heart hammering. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to finish it. "And do you agree you told me you were divorced?" Another yes. Priya smiled at me, an ally forged in a very specific fire. She said into the mic, "Miss Other Woman, would you like to introduce our charity's newest donation?" She gestured to the silent auction list. Lot number 7, a late model sports car, recently retitled in my name a week earlier when Lucas panicked about tax efficiency. I had the pink slip in my clutch. We raised 180,000 euros in 10 minutes. He lost the car, the stock claim, and the VP title in a single evening. After, Priya and I had tea in her kitchen, now obviously her kitchen. She slid a folder across. Inside were screenshots, timelines, a draft apology Lucas would be sending to both of us and their kids. "You didn't deserve this," she said. I drove home in a rideshare. The driver pointed at the news notification on his phone. "Wild Gala," he said. The headline wasn't about Lucas. It was about the charity breaking its fundraising record, thanks to lot number 7. That night, I wore red for myself.
Story 4. I wasn't family, just the neighbor who always had a ladder. That's how I ended up at Emilio's funeral, standing in the back with people who knew the color of his trash bins. He'd been the Blacks' barbecue king, the guy who loaned drill bits and collected Christmas lights like trophies. His wife, Anna, had eyes that looked like they had outlived a storm. Halfway through the service, the slideshow started. Soft music, baby pictures, vacations. Then a photo popped up of Emilio at a beach I'd never seen on his Facebook. 2 kids clung to his legs. The room did that collective inhale you only hear when a magician drops the deck and all the cards are blank. Anna's sister scrambled to the USB plugged into the projector. "It pulled from Google Photos," she whispered to the priest. "Automated album." The next picture was a birthday cake in a kitchen that wasn't Anna's. There was a woman about Anna's age with a ring that matched Anna's ring. The music kept playing because no one knew what else to do. The second family sat on the left, near the aisle. The woman, Lucia, stood up, trembling. "I didn't know he married you first," she said, voice breaking. "He said the divorce was pending. He said papers take time." Her son, 9 maybe, clutched the toy car. I expected chaos. Instead, Anna walked to the front, nodded at the priest to stop the slideshow, and turned to Lucia. "We're going to speak after," she said. Her voice had a steel I had only heard when she told teenagers to slow down on the cul-de-sac. After the burial, the 2 women sat on a picnic table in the churchyard, dividing photos like poker chips. Anna had a folder. Inside, bank statements, Western Union receipts, unexplained cash withdrawals. She told me this was for his brother's visa. Lucia took out her own folder. School registrations, a lease, money orders with Anna's account number in the memo line. Here's the karma. A month later, the cul-de-sac threw a yard sale to help the kids. Tables covered in tools, grills, that ridiculous inflatable Santa. City workers showed up with clipboards. Apparently, Emilio had been billing the municipality for community events that never happened. The reimbursements had gone to a P.O. box. The address was in the church's bulletin. Donations for the youth group. Contact Emilio. The city clawed back the money from his estate, which meant both wives could legally disclaim the debts. And the kicker? His life insurance named spouse, without a specific name. The insurer, facing 2 marriages, paid it into a trust, split for all minor children equally. On the day the trust papers were signed, I carried over my ladder to help Anna take down the last of the lights that had been up since December. Lucia arrived with a step stool. They worked side by side. New neighbors drove by slow, craning necks looking for scandal. There wasn't any. Just 2 women carefully untangling a life, bulb by bulb.
Story 5. I wanted kids more than a big wedding, so we married at City Hall and started trying right away. For 5 years, every month was a pep talk and then a funeral for something that hadn't had a chance to exist. My husband, Mark, was saintly about it. He held me during shots, made tea after failed cycles, sighed about God's timing. He told everyone we were infertility warriors, and people loved him for it. When I suggested we check him again, just to rule things out, he reminded me of his heroic semen analysis during year 1. Pristine swimmers, he joked, holding the printout like a diploma. We saved for IVF. We cut vacations, sold the second car, borrowed from my parents. The clinic called me resilient. I felt like a pincushion made of hope. 4 months into the process, I got an explanation of benefits in the mail from our insurance. Urology outpatient procedure, vasectomy. Date, 11 months before our wedding. My vision tunneled. I called the number expecting a coding error. The rep, cheerful, confirmed the details and the provider. I could hear my own breath as she explained the follow-up semen analysis results. Azoospermia, successful. I drove to the clinic. The nurse on duty looked at the paper and then at me and softened. "Do you want a quiet room?" she asked. I shook my head. "I want a copy." At home, Mark walked in with flowers. I set the EOB on the counter. He went gray, then tried the kind of lies that only work on people who haven't paid invoices. "It's a billing mistake. I did it after we started trying. I reversed it." He had a line for every year. I sued for fraud in the divorce, which my lawyer called ambitious until she saw the timeline. Vasectomy, wedding, 5 years of treatments he encouraged and posted about, the GoFundMe his mother started that raised 12,000 euros. The judge requested an affidavit from the urologist. It arrived with the unromantic gravity of a meteor. Dates, consent, post-procedure counseling notes. a tidy little paragraph. Patient stated he does not plan to disclose the procedure to his fiancée. The court ordered him to reimburse everything, my medical costs, my parents' loan, and the donations. He tried to file a hardship claim. It was denied because, in a delicious twist, his new fiancée had posted a video of their engagement party on Instagram featuring a champagne tower in front of a "Baby Soon" neon sign. The comments were unkind. 2 weeks after the decree, I got a message request on Facebook from a woman named Elise. "I'm Mark's fiancée," it began. I braced for accusation. Instead, I found the court documents on the county site. "Thank you for getting the truth in writing. I canceled the venue. If you need me to testify for the GoFundMe refunds, I will." I sat on the kitchen floor and cried for all the phantom futures, then laughed, sharp and startled, because karma had chosen a very public stage. Mark texted me a photo of a collection notice with, "Happy now?" I sent back a screenshot of the refunded GoFundMe page and a single line. "Resilience is expensive. You picked the wrong accountant."
Story 6. I was the maid of honor and the only person who didn't swoon when Dr. Adrian Cole talked about his residency war stories. I work in hospital credentialing. War stories have billing codes. His never did. For 3 years, he told my best friend Lena that his hospital preferred paper charts and that Epic Access couldn't be shared for HIPAA reasons. He had a lab coat monogrammed and a parking pass on his visor. He wore scrubs to brunch like a costume. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lena asked me to help switch her insurance to his plan. I called the HR contact he gave her. The extension led to a break room vending machine. I started digging quietly. State license lookup? No match. NPI search? Nothing. The residency program he flaunted had a graduation page with photos. No Adrian. But I didn't drop a bomb. Lena had been love-starved her whole life. I needed proof that would land and stick. At the reception, Adrian opened with a grand toast about healing people and our future pediatricians at home. A kid from the venue staff fainted. Heat, nerves, all of it. The room looked to Adrian. He froze. Not "I'm panicking" froze. Empty. He didn't check airway, didn't call for ice, didn't do anything but hover, palms up like a mime. Our bartender, a former EMT, slid in, elevated the kid's legs, slapped a cold compress on his neck, counted pulses. The boy blinked back awake to the wrong man holding the microphone. The DJ tried to smooth it over. I asked for the mic. "Adrian," I said lightly, "why don't you flash your license for a fun photo?" Laughter. Phones up. I pulled the slide deck onto the projector. State board search, no license. NPI registry, no listing. The residency's alumni page, no face. And finally, a screenshot of his LinkedIn edit history. Last major change, 2 days before our first bridesmaid dress fitting. Lena's father stood. "Son, what exactly do you do?" Adrian said weakly, "Clinical consulting." But consulting doesn't come with a hospital badge that, when zoomed, says volunteer services. The venue manager, whose cousin actually runs HR at Adrian's supposed hospital, had arrived 5 minutes earlier after I texted her. She stepped up and read a letter on hospital letterhead. "Mr. Cole, cease and desist from misrepresenting affiliation." You could feel the room shift away from him. Lena didn't throw a drink or scream. She walked to the head table, picked up the card box with their honeymoon fund, handed it to the bartender who helped the kid, and said into the mic, "Tonight's gift goes to the person who actually helped someone." Adrian sputtered about love, second chances, misunderstanding. The twist? The officiant, Lena's rabbi, said, "We never signed, nothing to annul." The band struck up, we danced without him.
Story 7. I'm the rhythm guitarist from a local indie band that almost made it. Our frontman, Matt, was a hurricane of charm. He married Sage, the quiet woman who sat through every rehearsal knitting in the corner. He called her his muse. We didn't know muse meant ghostwriter with no royalties. When our breakout single hit 1 million streams, Matt performed it on a live-streamed reunion show and gave a weepy speech about writing it on the bathroom floor alone. I kept my mouth shut. I had seen Sage's notebook. The same scratched-out bridge, the exact oddball rhyme that Matt always pretended to hate until it charted. For years, she shrugged when I asked. He needs it more than I do, she'd say, eyes on her tea. Life moved. The band broke up. Matt got a solo deal. Sage got a job at the library and stopped showing up to gigs. Then, the label planned a 10th anniversary stream with live stems for fans to remix. New content, bigger checks. I got an email with the raw project files. Out of habit, I opened the lyric doc's properties. Author S. Ellery. Not a stray initial somewhere. Every version over 6 months. The cloud revision history scrolled like a rosary of midnight edits from a single IP, the public library where Sage worked. I called our old producer, the only adult in that whole era. He showed up to the stream with a thumb drive and a smirk. Mid-broadcast, he shared his screen to demo the making of. He clicked open track info. The chat flooded. Viewers watched the metadata blink like a confession. Sage's name, timestamps, comments in her steady, lowercase voice in her comments. Matt tried to laugh it off. Group effort, babe. But the label's lawyer interrupted live to say they were correcting credits pursuant to new information. The stream cut. When it returned, the title card had changed. Written by Sage Ellery. A week later, Sage invited me for coffee. She slid an envelope across the table. Back royalties. She said you kept the bridge when he wanted to cut it. Thank you for that. I asked her why she never fought. She looked at the door, where Matt paced outside on his phone, oblivious. He would have loved me less, she said simply. The twist came months later at a small festival. Matt took the stage to play his anthem. The backing track triggered with Sage's guide vocal, clear, aching, indisputable. The file the producer had slipped into the set list, a final truth bomb. The crowd sang her words back to him. He walked off. She didn't come to claim the mic. She bought new shelves for the poetry section and kept her name.
Story 8. I'm a university librarian with a specialization in digital scholarship, the person faculty call when their PDFs won't behave. Eloise, our department star, had a husband, Trent, who wore tweed and told every wineglass in earshot that he was finishing a PhD. For 6 years, he clinked to ABD and dissertation purgatory, and Eloise repeated it like prayer to donors. We're a 2 PhD household soon. He landed a winter lecturer gig based on a book proposal, Grief in the Archive. I skimmed the proposal out of curiosity. The prose felt familiar. Not seen it before familiar, shelved it myself familiar. 5 years prior, a graduate student named Rowan had deposited a thesis with almost the same scaffolding, a phrase about dust as a theology, a distinctive footnote joke. I pulled the thesis file from the repository and ran a side-by-side in our comparison tool. Paragraphs matched like teeth. I could have gone to Eloise, but she chaired his hiring committee. Instead, I emailed our research integrity office with a calm subject line and a volcano in the body. They asked for documentation. I sent the annotated diff, the submission logs, the IP addresses. Trent had submitted edits from Eloise's home network at 3 a.m. on nights she tweeted about grading marathons. Convocation day arrived with pomp and silk hoods. Trent was slated to give the new faculty address. He strode up, smoothing imaginary regalia, and launched into a passage about memory's holy mischief. Behind him, per policy, the accessibility team projected live captions. We'd fed the speech file to Decaptioner in advance. only the Integrity Office had replaced the prepared text with an excerpt from Rowan's thesis, complete with citation. As Trent spoke, the screen displayed Rowan Daly, Theology of Dust, 2019. He kept going, oblivious, while the hall read the credit out loud in murmurs. The provost stepped up, whispered, and gently steered him away from the mic. The room rustled. Eloise's face went slack and then rigid, a woman speed-running all 5 stages. Later, the official announcement appeared, Trent's contract terminated, publisher notified, investigation continuing. The library issued a quiet correction in our catalog, adding a note, portions of this work were plagiarized, original author acknowledged and compensated. The punch hit when Rowan, who had left academia after a brutal year, returned to campus to give a talk. Eloise sat in the back. When Rowan finished, we expected a fury. Instead, Rowan said, Dr. Eloise, your 2014 article kept me going when my advisor disappeared. I'm sorry your house became a battlefield. The room exhaled. Eloise nodded, eyes wet. The next week, she filed for divorce and requested adjunct funding be diverted to a dissertation completion grant in Rowan's name. Trent applied to teach at a community center. They Googled him. He now runs Storytime on Saturdays, where every book has an author on the cover in big, impossible-to-miss letters.
Story 9. I organize our town's Veterans Day Parade. I'm also the daughter of a quiet corpsman who never once wore his dress blues outside the closet. So when my neighbor's fiance, Bryce, started showing up to planning meetings in a chest full of medals he earned in classified ops, I had a bad taste in my mouth. He'd tell my volunteers that the Marine Corps granted him special rank waivers, then mansplain flag folding to a 20-year color guard. His partner, Kasha, believed him. For years, he used service trauma to excuse lost jobs and can't talk about it to dodge details. He got discounts, free drinks, even a donated truck for a hero. He spoke at a high school assembly and cried on cue, sobbing about brothers lost in the Kunar Valley 2011. I was there. The year was wrong. The unit didn't match his patch. I filed a FOIA request. The Department of the Navy replied, no record of service under his name, birth date, or the SSN that Tasha used for their joint taxes. He had bought his medals online. I looped in our VFW commander, Ms. Lillian, a retired logistics chief with the spine of a mast. We planned. Parade day, Bryce rode on the lead float, waving like a politician. We stopped at the reviewing stand for the wreath-laying. Ms. Lillian stepped to the mic and asked all veterans to stand. My father stood, old men and young women stood, the air shifted sacred. Then she said, if you are not a veteran, please remain seated and please remove any unearned insignia per Title 18 U.S. Code Section 704. Bryce half rose, looked around, and committed to standing. Lillian nodded to the police liaison. An officer approached and, very gently, asked Bryce to step down. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Lillian read the FOIA reply aloud. She wasn't cruel, just precise. We cherish service because it is paid for in pieces of a person. You do not get to cosplay our dead. Tasha stood too, shaking, not in pride. She took the mic. She told me he couldn't sleep because of helmet. Turns out he couldn't sleep because of lies. She pulled a shadow box from the float, a display he kept on their mantle, and opened it. Inside were medals pinned crookedly. She took out the Purple Heart, turned it over, and showed the back. Smooth. Real ones have engraving. She set it on the ground. The punch? The truck he'd been gifted by a dealership for wounded warriors had a clause, misrepresentation, voids, title transfer. The dealership towed it from the parade route in front of everyone. A week later, the high school invited my father to speak. He said 8 words. Service is quiet. The noise is for parades. Then he walked off to the loudest silence I've ever heard.
Story 10. I run a small sobriety podcast. I'm not a guru, just a woman who stopped drinking and now talks into a mic with guests who tell the truth. When Jasper wrote me a 3-page email about his 10 years sober and advocacy work, I booked him. He was dating my friend Bia, who had turned down champagne at my birthday because we don't keep alcohol in the house anymore. He had a sparkle that makes people listen. He talked beautifully on air about bottoming out, amends, the grace of mornings. My listeners flooded the comments. He made me cry. He had sponsorships lined up with a seltzer brand and a wellness app. Bia glowed. For years, she'd cleaned up after other men. Jasper seemed like the easy part of their life. 3 episodes later, a brewer DM'd me with a screenshot of a corporate filing. "Is this your guy?" it said. It was an LLC listing Jasper as managing member of a microbrewery 4 towns over, formed 3 years into his sobriety. Maybe he was just an investor, I thought. People change industries. Then another DM arrived. A photo of Jasper at a launch party last month, arm around a blonde, pint aloft. The kicker? The blonde was his ex-wife. The caption, "Couldn't do it without my ride or die." The timestamp placed him there on a night he told Bia he was at step work. I didn't ambush him off air. I invited him back for a live Q&A and set a breathalyzer on the table like a coaster. "Gimmick for the YouTube folks," I joked. He grinned. We started with listener questions. Halfway in, I said, "Fun one. Tell us about what it's like to be a sober person who owns a brewery." He blinked. I put the filing on the screen, then the photo. The chat detonated. Bia, in the front row, went white. Jasper reached for context. Silent partners, NA Beer, community. The LLC's SKUs on the state site were all double IPAs. He grabbed for the breathalyzer like it could rescue him, blew, and stared at the numbers. Not a DUI level, but not 0. He tried to argue mouthwash. I asked him to name the brand. He said Listerine, which would spike higher. The room held its breath while he spun. Finally, he said, "Small, relapse isn't failure." I agreed. Lying about it is. The twist wasn't the sponsors dropping him live, which they did, and Bia walking up, taking off her promise ring and saying, "I won't be your alibi." It came 3 months later when Jasper emailed me a clip. He was at a meeting, chips in hand, one day. He asked if I'd take the podcast episode down. I told him no. Truth had hurt him. Truth might help someone else. He wrote back, "Fair." Then Bia sent a photo from her new apartment, a shelf with coffee mugs where wine glasses used to hang, and a sticky note, "Mornings are the grace." She wasn't thanking him. She was reminding herself she no longer needed a liar to feel like a miracle.
Story 11. I'm a volunteer interpreter at our city courthouse, the person who tells people where to stand when English feels like a wall. 3 years ago, I helped a woman named Noura through a marriage-based adjustment interview. Her husband, Chase, squeezed her hand like a salesman. He'd been telling her and the entire church for years that he was handling everything with immigration, that she didn't need to confuse the process with her questions. He kept her passport in a fireproof box for safety, controlled every appointment, and translated whenever he liked the question better in his head. He'd also told everyone, often, how generous he was to marry someone with no papers, casting himself as savior and gatekeeper at once. Noura worked nights baking. He managed the bakery's books, which meant he drove her to work, pocketed her tips for the money order, and came home smelling like bars he claimed he never entered. The day of the big interview, Chase insisted on bringing a thin binder. It had exactly what you think: 2 photos, a single joint bill, a birthday card he had written to himself from Noura in looping cursive that looked like a 12-year-old's. The officer split them for separate questioning. I stayed with Noura as the officer gently asked about the apartment.
What color is your toothbrush? Green. Where do you keep the rice? Freezer, she laughed. He thinks it kills bugs. Then the officer raised one eyebrow and said, "Who is Delaney?" Nora blinked. The officer slid a photo across the table. Chase in a tuxedo, Delaney in a white dress. Not from years ago, but from 2 months prior. A Vegas chapel. The timestamp glowed like a taunt. Bigamy is not a cultural misunderstanding. It's a federal one. Chase had filed a withdrawal letter that morning behind Nora's back, claiming marital breakdown to save his skin and keep her under his thumb. He figured he'd get out clean and she'd be too scared to ask why. Here's where karma learned to speak in paperwork. The officer explained the Violence Against Women Act provisions in small, careful steps. If a spouse uses immigration to control you, threats, isolation, withholding documents, that's abuse, she said. Chase had given them the rope. His emails, uploaded with his withdrawal, were full of, "I'll call ICE if you talk back," and "Your family will never see you again." I watched Nora's shoulders square as she realized the cage had a latch on his side, not hers. 3 months later, at the naturalization ceremony for new citizens, I volunteered again. Families cried, kids waved tiny flags, and a row of bakery employees cheered like a soccer section. Nora stood in the front, hand over heart. When her name was called, the clerk mispronounced it. She corrected him, clear, steady. In the back, a deputy served Chase an indictment for marriage fraud and bigamy. He tried to slink away, but cameras caught him. Someone in the crowd recognized the Vegas chapel wallpaper and laughed. After the oath, Nora walked outside under a sky as wide as a promise. She handed me a warm box. "Cinnamon rolls," she said, "for the interpreter who told me the words." On the lid, in her neat script, my papers now belong to me.
Story 12. I led the church choir, which is to say, I juggled altos, broken microphones, and a budget that never quite bought enough batteries. Our worship leader, Gideon, had a wife, Ruth, who wore the same denim jacket every Sunday and apologized for the soundboard whenever it crackled. For years, Gideon told anyone clutching a checkbook that God had called him to radical stewardship. When Ruth asked why their account was empty, he called it fasting finances. He preached that tithes were holy. Meanwhile, the roof leaked, the piano wobbled, and Ruth used coupon apps to stretch groceries. We finally hired an auditor after the furnace died mid-December, and we sang Silent Night in mittens. Gideon welcomed the audit from the pulpit, announcing with a smile that transparency is worship. The auditor, a no-nonsense deacon from another church, asked for login credentials. Gideon claimed the bank doesn't allow multiple users. I watched Ruth's mouth press thin. She'd been told that line about a dozen things: bank accounts, email, even the Amazon smile. The reveal happened on a Tuesday budget meeting we live-streamed for members. 30 people online, 10 in folding chairs, 1 space heater. The auditor shared her screen to show a year of transactions. Everything looked modest until she clicked Filters and unchecked Hidden. A second column appeared, a pattern of transfers to a media ministry vendor. The vendor's address? A condo downtown. The payee? Ruth's maiden name appended with LLC. Ruth's eyes blew wide. She didn't have an LLC. Gideon tried to explain it as tax structuring while he went pale. The auditor clicked one more tab. Comments. Gideon had written himself notes in the memo field. Upgrade mic for Easter. Actually a Peloton. Guest artist honorarium. Weekend in Miami. Benevolence. Tiffany earrings. He had been laundered by the congregation's trust and his own theology. Ruth stood up. She didn't shout. She walked to the soundboard, turned his mic off, and turned on the room mic. The Bible says to confess to one another, she said, voice steady as a hymn. So I'll start. I believed my husband because I loved him. I told my son we couldn't afford braces while he bought bicycles that don't leave the house.
the chat filled with crying emoji and "we love you," and then, like an amen, the auditor said, "We've already filed the report. The bank will reverse the transfers to the church. Personal liability attaches to Gideon." The twist? The following Sunday, Ruth took the pulpit for the first time. She read from the prophet about rebuilding walls and then announced the new treasurer, herself, after a unanimous vote the night before. She sold the Peloton and paid the furnace up front. When Gideon tried to claim restoration, the insurance company denied coverage for his loss of income claim because of fraud and, in a wild poetic turn, quoted his own sermon in the denial letter. Steal from God, reap the whirlwind. We sang "Great is Thy Faithfulness" while he packed his office in silence. Ruth's denim jacket finally had a new button that didn't fall off. Treasurer.
Story 13. I'm the lab safety officer at a mid-tier university, which means I spend my days convincing brilliant people not to microwave agar. Our cancer biology lab lost a big grant after key samples degraded. The PI, Dr. Lin, took the hit. Her ex, a former postdoc named Cade, pounced on Twitter. Told you she cuts corners. #fraud. He tagged journals, reporters, anyone with a bio. The campus rumor mill went turbine. I started where I always do. Logs and lint. Freezers don't lie. Each ultra-cold unit records every door opened, who used their badge, and temperature excursions. 2 months of data showed midnight entries under a guest code, the same 4 digits as the lab's street address, a lazy default no one bothered to change. Lynn's name wasn't on those logs. The CCTV over the corridor caught a person in a hoodie and nitrile gloves, face blocked, but their gait was distinctive, a heel-first roll I recognized from safety trainings. Cade. When I confronted the lab manager, she burst into tears. "He still has a key," she said. "He said he was grabbing a mug." We pulled every box. In 3 racks, vials were relabeled with the wrong passage numbers in neat, tiny handwriting. I compared it to archive notebooks. Exact match to Cade's 5s, little hats on them like European ones. It's the nerd forensic equivalent of a fingerprint. But I needed something that would talk to people who don't speak freezer, so I ran contamination checks. The degraded samples had trace amounts of benzophenone, UV-curable adhesive. I checked our supply logs. No one ordered it. Where else does it appear? On the inside of cheap lab goggles, the kind you buy in bulk for undergrads, and on Cade's TikTok from 6 months ago where he bragged about hacking his goggles with glue to stop fogging, hands visible, bottle label flickering into frame for 2 blessed frames. We scheduled a department town hall. Cade showed up in the back, smirking with a reporter he'd baited. I walked through the freezers, the badges, the benzophenone, the dancing 5. The reporter blinked as I played Cade's TikTok on the projector and paused it on the glue label. The room breathed in, slow. Cade said, too loudly, "Anyone could have glue." I said, just as loudly, "Not anyone had the guest code and midnight access on the nights the glue shows up in our cells." The dean announced an investigation turned criminal. The grantor reinstated bridge funding pending results. Later, as I locked the lab, Dr. Lin stood in the doorway, hand on the jam, like people do when they've been carrying a weight so long they forgot how to stand without it. "How did you know to check the glue?" she asked. I shrugged. "Karma leaves residue." She laughed once, surprised. We changed every code, every lock. The next week, Cade's threads disappeared. A post went up in their place. Turns out, safety is sexy. It got 3 likes, all bots.
Story 14. I'm a title officer. Closings are supposed to be boring. Names, stamps, relief. This one was a circus. My sellers, a quiet couple in their 60s, were unloading the house they raised 3 kids in. Their daughter's ex, Brent, had been living in the basement temporarily for 18 months. He called the office daily to tell me the sale was illegal and that he had power of attorney. When he showed up to the closing, I was ready with decaf and patience. He slapped a POA down, Clean formatting, correct notary block, signature that looked enough like Dad's to make a tired clerk squint. The buyers shifted in their chairs. Brent launched into a speech about elder abuse and hereditary rights. I let him talk. Then I opened the document properties on the PDF he'd emailed earlier. Author, template, John Doe. Company, free forms for you. Creation date, 3 days ago at 2:17 a.m. I printed a copy of the seller's actual recorded POA from 5 years prior, completely different notary, style, seal impression. Brent called mine forged. I love a man who doesn't understand how counties work. I pulled the notary logs for both documents. Mine matched. His notary commission number belonged to a woman who retired in 2014. He said, "She came back to help me." Sure, like the dead come back to witness wills. Still, he smirked. "They can't kick me out. I've got tenant rights." He did not. He'd never paid rent, and we'd served the proper notices weeks ago. The sheriff's deputy assigned to civil standby leaned against the doorframe, bored. The twist arrived in an envelope I'd been saving. A certified letter addressed to Brent from his employer, opened by mistake when it came in a stack for the seller's address. It was a termination letter for misuse of company letterhead in the preparation of legal documents, with an attached screenshot of Brent editing the POA template from his work computer, cursor flickering next to John Doe. I slid it across the table. The buyer's realtor choked on a cough laugh. Brent grabbed the papers and tried to leave. The deputy stepped aside to let him walk directly into 2 process servers in the hall with a trespass notice and a court date. He whispered to me as they passed, "You're ruining my life." I said, "You printed your own ruin in 12-point Times New Roman." We closed. The sellers handed me a bag of lemon bars and cried in the parking lot while the locksmith changed the locks. When the buyers carried their first box over the threshold, the wife paused, looked back at me, and mouthed, "Thank you." The house exhaled. Karma isn't always thunder. Sometimes it's the soft thud of a new key turning where a bluff used to be.